Willow Street, a picturesque row of Victorian houses. But at number 13, darkness lingered. A century ago, a gruesome murder. A family slain, their souls trapped. Now the house stood empty, whispering secrets to the wind. Years passed, stories faded to legend. The house remained, a spectre of tragedy. Its windows, like empty eyes, watched the street, waiting for the next chapter of its horrifying story to begin. The Miller family arrived. John, the father, sought a fresh start. His wife, Mary, hoped for peace. Their daughter, Lilly, felt an uneasy curiosity. They overlooked the rumours, dismissed the warnings, unaware of the darkness that awaited them. The moving truck pulled away. Silence fell over Willow Street. John unlocked the front door. The heavy oak door creaked open. A musty smell wafted out. They stepped inside, stepping into the abyss. The first night. Lily's teddy bear vanished. It was a cherished toy, one she never let out of her sight. The family searched every corner of the house, but it was nowhere to be found. The disappearance was unsettling, but they tried to brush it off as a simple misplacement. Days later, it was found ripped apart in the attic. The sight was horrifying. Mary, Lily's mother, couldn't understand how it got there. She started hearing whispers, soft and indistinct, but unmistakably real. They seemed to come from the walls, the floors, the very air around her. Her name echoed from the empty halls. "Mary!" the whispers called, sending chills down her spine. She would rush to the hallway only to find it empty, the shadows playing tricks on her eyes. The once familiar home now felt like a stranger, filled with unseen eyes watching her every move. John, her husband, dismissed it as an old house settling. He laughed off her concerns, attributing the noises to the creaks and groans of the aging structure. But even he couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease that seemed to permeate the air. But fear began to creep in. It started with small things. A cold draft in a warm room, the feeling of being watched, the hairs on the back of their necks standing on end. The children too began to sense it, their laughter turning to whispers of their own. Like a shadow it spread. The fear was insidious, creeping into their minds and hearts. It was no longer just the whispers or the cold spots. It was a pervasive dread that hung over them like a dark cloud. They felt trapped, unable to escape the growing terror. Days turned into weeks. The once vibrant home was now a place of fear and uncertainty. Every creak, every whisper, every shadow seemed to hold a threat. The family was on edge, their nerves frayed, their sleep disturbed by nightmares and unexplained noises. Each day, a new horror. The calendar on the wall marked the passage of time, but it felt like they were stuck in a never-ending nightmare. The days blurred together, each one bringing a new, inexplicable event that deepened their fear. Cold spots in warm rooms. They would walk into a room and feel an icy chill, despite the warmth of the house. It was as if the very air was haunted, filled with the presence of something unseen and malevolent. Footsteps in the dead of night. They would lie in bed, listening to the sound of footsteps echoing through the halls. The creaking floorboards seemed to carry the weight of invisible feet, pacing back and forth, never stopping, never resting. Glimpses of figures lurking in the shadows. Out of the corner of their eyes they would see shapes moving, figures that vanished when they turned to look. It was as if the shadows themselves were alive, hiding secrets and watching them with unseen eyes. The family's unease grew into full-blown terror. They were no longer just uneasy, they were terrified. The house that was once their sanctuary had become a prison, filled with fear and dread. They huddled together, seeking comfort in each other's presence. But the fear was always there, lurking in the shadows. They were prisoners in their own home. The walls that once provided safety now felt like barriers, trapping them with the unseen horrors that haunted their every moment. They longed for escape, but there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide from the shadows and whispers that had taken over their lives. One night the terror escalated. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. The full moon cast an eerie glow over the landscape, making the shadows seem to dance with a life of their own. It was on this night that the unimaginable happened. A piercing scream tore through the house. It was a sound that could freeze the blood in your veins, a cry of pure, unadulterated terror. The scream echoed through the halls, bouncing off the walls and reverberating in the hearts of everyone who heard it. "Lilly!" John and Mary rushed to her room. The door was locked. John broke it down. Lilly was gone. Her window wide open, the room was in disarray as if a struggle had taken place. The curtains fluttered in the breeze and the cold night air filled the room with an ominous chill. A chilling laughter echoed in the night. Panic set in. It was a laughter that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a sinister sound that sent shivers down their spines. The forest outside seemed to come alive with the sound, amplifying the terror that gripped their hearts. They searched the house and the street. No sign of Lilly. Every corner, every shadow was scrutinized, but she was nowhere to be found. The once familiar surroundings now seemed alien and threatening, as if the very walls were conspiring to hide her from them. Despair threatened to consume them. John called the police. His hands trembled as he dialed the number, his voice shaking as he tried to explain the situation. Mary clung to him, her eyes wide with fear and desperation. They felt utterly helpless, trapped in a nightmare from which there was no waking. But how could they explain? The events of the night seemed too surreal, too horrifying to put into words. The police arrived, their faces grim as they listened to John and Mary's frantic account. They searched the house but found no clues, no evidence of what had transpired. The whispers, the shadows. They seemed to mock their efforts, to taunt them with their inability to find Lilly. The house was filled with an oppressive sense of dread, as if it were alive with malevolent intent. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights seemed to whisper of unseen horrors. The feeling of dread that clung to the air. It was a palpable presence, a weight that pressed down on their chests and made it hard to breathe. The forest outside loomed dark and foreboding, its twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The house itself seemed to pulse with a sinister energy, as if it were feeding off their fear. The night was far from over, and the terror had only just begun. The police found nothing. Days turned into weeks. Hope dwindled. Then one day a breakthrough. A psychic, drawn to the house's energy. She claimed to see Lilly, trapped within the house, held captive by the spirits. The psychic offered a way, a ritual, to appease the spirits, to free Lilly. John and Mary clung to this hope. They agreed. But the ritual was dangerous, a gamble with the unknown. The ritual began at midnight. Candles flickered. The air grew heavy. The psychic chanted. The house seemed to respond. Walls vibrated. Shadows danced. John and Mary watched, hope and fear warring within them. Suddenly, the psychic screamed. A dark force surged through the house. Furniture flew across the room. John and Mary shielded themselves. Then silence. The psychic lay still. The ritual had failed. They were doomed. John, in a fit of rage and despair, smashed a mirror. Behind the shattered glass, a hidden room. Inside, a diary. The diary of the family murdered a century ago. The final entry sent chills down their spines. The diary revealed the truth. There were no ghosts, no vengeful spirits. The house itself was alive. It fed on fear. It lured families in. Then it devoured their souls. John and Mary, armed with this horrifying knowledge, knew they had to escape, but the house had other plans. Doors slammed shut, windows refused to break. They were trapped. The house was closing in, ready to consume them. John found Lily's teddy bear. He squeezed it. A faint heartbeat. Lily was alive. Somewhere within the house. They had to find her. They had to fight the house, for Lily, for their lives. They found Lily in the attic, near a hidden passage. The house fought back. Floorboards buckled, walls pressed inward. The air was thick with dust and the scent of decay, making it hard to breathe. Every creak of the floorboards echoed like a scream in the silence. The shadows seemed to move, playing tricks on their eyes, making them question what was real and what was not. The house was alive, and it did not want them to leave. They raced through the passage, hearts pounding in their chests. The walls seemed to close in on them, the narrow corridor becoming tighter with every step. The darkness was suffocating, and the only sound was their ragged breathing and the distant, ominous creaking of the house. They could feel the house's malevolent presence, as if it were a living entity, watching their every move, waiting for them to falter. A desperate fight for survival ensued. They could hear whispers, ghostly voices that seemed to come from the walls themselves, urging them to give up, to surrender to the darkness. But they fought on, driven by sheer willpower and the desperate need to escape. Every step was a battle, every breath a struggle. The unseen threat loomed closer, its presence felt but never seen, adding to the terror of the unknown. They emerged into the cool night air, gasping for breath. The contrast between the oppressive darkness of the house and the open night sky was overwhelming. They could see the stars above, a stark reminder of the world outside, a world they had almost forgotten in their fight for survival. The cool breeze was a welcome relief, a sign that they had made it out, that they were still alive. Behind them, the house on Willow Street stood silent. Its dark windows seemed to watch them, a silent sentinel of the horrors they had just escaped. The house was a relic of a bygone era, its once grand facade now a decaying shell, hiding the malevolent force within. It stood as a reminder of the nightmarish ordeal they had endured, a place that would forever be etched in their memories, victorious for now. They had managed to escape the clutches of the house, but the victory felt hollow. The memories of the night would haunt them, the fear and the terror they had experienced would linger. They knew that the house was not done with them, that its dark influence would continue to loom over their lives. But for now they were free, and that was all that mattered. John, Mary and Lily knew they would never be the same. The ordeal had changed them, had left scars that would never fully heal. They had faced their worst fears and had come out the other side, but the experience had left them shaken, their nerves frayed. They had seen things that defied explanation, had felt a terror that words could not describe. They were survivors, but they were also haunted. They had escaped with their lives, but the cost had been high. The fear, the uncertainty, the constant threat of danger had taken its toll. They were exhausted, both physically and mentally. The relief of having made it out alive was tempered by the knowledge that the house still stood, that its dark secrets were still hidden within its walls. They had survived, but they were not unscathed. But the house and its secrets would forever haunt their dreams. The memories of the night would linger. The fear and the terror would never fully fade. They knew that the house was not just a building, but a malevolent force, a dark presence that would continue to haunt them. They had escaped, but the house had left its mark on them, a mark that would never fully disappear.